Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, it's back for more power supply wiring up, and yeah, apologize for this being kind of a slow process. I've kind of rushed through and skipped some steps and stuff in the past, and people have been confused and get a bunch of emails and have to shoot pictures with arrows and stuff. And so this time I'm going super slow. And so we're going to wire up some more of the power supply and the heater stuff and hopefully get most of that done in this segment. I hope. So let's give that a shot and see how far we get. Let's get busy putting this thing together. Okay, so now we're going to install the last bolt for our choke, and we were waiting to get this little tag strip prepared, and this is where the one we just cut sits right there. And you can see this would get in the way if we had 5 of them and that other one on the end. That's why we cut it off, so we got plenty of room. You snug that down, and then you go ahead and flip the amp over and tighten these up because we're done with the choke then. Center it up. That's the nice thing about those little keeps nuts. They will grab with the little star washer they've got, and you can just tighten it up from this side once they're finger tight on the other side. So you can go ahead and tighten these all the way down. And then the one with a tag strip will flip the amp over and make sure that it's centered. Might have to hold the nut with a pair of pliers because it will try to rotate the tag strip when you're tightening it. Just like that. See how it's trying to rotate it? So we want to hold it like that. And you can hold it with an adjustable wrench or a little pair of pliers or whatever you have to keep it from rotating while you do the final tightening of the Allen bolt. And there's some of y'all are thinking, oh my gosh, you're showing so much painful detail, and I'm telling you, every time that I don't, somebody emails me and says, well, how did you hold that while it was turning? Or something else. So I'm really trying to do this in excruciating detail. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting our grounds over here from the transformer, which will be this red with a yellow stripe, and it's going to connect to that first terminal right there. So just hold it up. Let me pull this back so you can see it a little better. Just hold it up like that. And snip it just on the other side of that. I know it's kind of scary because it's kind of measured twice, cut once, because you can't add back what you cut off. If you cut it too short where it won't reach, then you're kind of screwed. Well, I guess you could add a little bit to the wire, but that just makes it look messy. And the other one we're going to be connecting to the same place is this green with the yellow stripe, and that's the 6.3 volt heater center tap. Again, just snip it off, strip it back, and wrap it around. And you can see I stripped back enough where I've got a little bit of length there so I can wrap it around this lug and it'll stay there. Now if you want to, you can go ahead and kind of tack that with some solder. I think I'm going to, but make sure you leave some room here at the top because we're also going to be putting the negative side of the cap right there. But this will just kind of hold these wires in place while we're working. You don't have to super solder it. Just kind of tack them like that and hold them like down that way, so you're leaving a gap there at the top to stick the capacitor lead through. And there's just enough room for the big Soline cap that's going to sit right there. So these two leads are going to go over to our rectifier tube, and these are as well. And you can see I've already twisted these up. So you want to do the same thing here. Now, one of the tricks to doing this is you want to make sure that both of them are twisted. You don't want to go just like that, where you've got like one wire straight and the other one's just wrapped around it. With the stranded wire, it's almost impossible to do that anyway. Again, don't twist it so hard that you twist off the stuff inside the transformer. You don't have to get super crazy with it, but something like that should work fine. So we've got both of those done. Now, on this transformer over here, we're going to be putting this extra tag strip that we had left over, this little guy. It's going to sit right there. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the output transformers, and I don't think I need to show you doing that. It just uses these little screws, and then it's got little metal plates that sit in here, and the transformers go in from the other side. So let me get that done and get this little tag strip here mounted, because we're going to be attaching the two 6.3 volt heater wires to this little tag strip. Okay, we can see we got our super nice ISO transformers mounted up, and we've got our little tag strip here, the one we cut off of that longer one, and we're going to use this angle one. Looks like it's going to work really well. So what we're going to be doing here is we got the 6.3 volt green heater wires, and we twist them up like this, and I'm going to solder them in the lower holes of this tag strip. So you hold it up like this, cut that one, cut that one. We come in here and strip these back. We don't need a ton of wire, because we're just going to stick it through the hole and solder it. About like that'll work. Let me zoom in here so I can show you. Just about like that. And then I go ahead and tin the end of these. And by that I mean just putting a little bit of solder onto the stranded wires here so they stay in one group. Basically turns them into like solid core wire. Get some solder already on them and fluxed up. Makes them a lot easier to solder in when we're going to be putting them. And then we stick them through this lower hole and make sure that the insulation isn't going through and that it's just the wire. You might have to kind of bend it around a little bit till it sits with just the wire coming through. And you might have to solder one and then the other, like that one looks good. And then we come in here and solder this guy up. Like that. Tweak this other one where you don't want the insulation like in the hole while you're soldering, because it'll just contaminate the joint. And make sure that you get the metal of the tag strip hot enough where the solder is actually melting to it and not just the wire. Like that. And you can see we cooked the insulation a little bit, but you know, that just kind of happens sometimes. Can't get upset about it. You can kind of push it back in place if you want to try to keep it neat looking. But, you know, that's just part of soldering stuff really heavy duty. Sometimes you end up cooking the insulation a little bit, but that's fine. It's just an appearance thing, and then I try to like tap that down and get it as close to the chassis as I can. And see how neat that turns out. And then we're going to be hooking up our heater wires in the upper parts of the tag strip. And that gives us some extra room in case we need it. So the next thing we're going to do is probably going to scoot down here and work on the power switch. And I'm using these ones that have a 12 volt illumination, and it's possible by the time I'm selling these kits I'm going to be using 120 volt ones. I haven't really experimented with them yet, and if they work out, that will simplify the wiring. A couple of viewers have told me that they started or used them in their builds and they really like them, but I've been using these 12 volt ones and putting a small little rectifier over here across the 6.3 volt winding to get the voltage rectified and have a little cap there. Anyway, screw the nut down. I like turning them like this orientation. This will be the negative and that's the positive for the illuminator. And I go ahead and cut off the one that says normally closed because we're not going to use it. And then we just have the two we are going to use. Now it does come with a little pigtail that looks like this. And I was going to try to use it, but then I realized that I need to put this XY safety cap across the switch so that it tamps down the noise that you'll get in the amp if this capacitor isn't across the switch. And so I've decided really the best way to do that is just directly solder the wires to the switch. So come in here with this deep socket, and you don't need to even put a ratchet on it. Just get it nice and finger tight, snug, like that. You can just get a pair of pliers in there too, but I do enough of these where I got this little socket and then I like ground this down flush so that it really gets a good bite of the nut. But for this one-time use, a pair of pliers will work. Okay, the next thing you want to do, let me zoom in here and show you what this looks like. Twist up a pair of wires like this and then bend the ends where they're opposite each other like that. It'll make it a lot easier to hook up this switch. So then we take our wires that we've bent up like that and go ahead and put this bottom one in first. And then you can reach on the underside and just bend it over so it makes like a U-turn around that terminal. And then come in here and solder that little guy in place. This is probably the hardest one to get to. If you want to try to do it without frying this other wire. It's okay to kind of put a little blob of solder on there because we're going to have to attach the capacitor to that lead as well. And then we want to come up through the hole from the bottom and bend that lead over. And then solder this guy. Like that. You can see I left a little glob of solder on there. I've got this little cap. Bent the leads up like that. Put a little bit of solder on there like that. So we can just hold it in place here and solder it across these terminals. There's one side. And once you get one side done, you can kind of bend the lead around a little bit and get it sitting on top of the other solder for the lower terminal, and come in here and heat that up, and then just make sure it's soldered in place. And just let it sit like that. And then got another twisted pair of wires, and this is going to go to the illuminator or the LED inside the little switch. And I've tinned the ends of these, and so just come in however you have to get to this other terminal. Let's see, I think I can go over the top here like that. And you want to put the lighter colored wire on the positive side, which is this side, so you'll know which one's positive and negative, because the switch isn't polarized, but of course the LED is. And these don't really need to be twisted because they're DC, but we just twisted them so they'll kind of stay together. And then bend that over out of the way. We don't want it touching the AC somehow accidentally. Solder this other one in. Honestly, this is one of the more pain in the butt kind of things on doing this. And like I said, we may be using a 120 or 110 volt, 120 volt AC illuminator switch in the future, so we don't have to mess with this extra pair of wires. And I think we can there's a way to just jumper those wires and put a resistor right on the switch itself. Might even be able to do it before we install it in the chassis. But anyway, then the last thing we have to do is put a little piece of heat shrink tubing over this whole mess. And it's going to go just like that. And I did find this little heat shrink gun. Let me zoom out here. This little heat shrink gun works awesome. And I did a review on it. I'll put it in the link below. It's really handy for dealing with heat shrink tubing. So let me get that done. And it does come with this handy little reflector thing so you can get around to the back side. And there we go, all heat shrinked up, and all safe, away from prying hands. It does seem silly to me that they require that you heat shrink up these sorts of 110 volt AC connections, but it's perfectly okay to have 750 volts AC exposed. But anyway, it does kind of heat shrink in this little capacitor, gives it a little support, and guides the wires away and just looks neater. So yeah, if you want to put it on there, you can. If you don't have a heat shrink gun, you don't really have to do that. But anyway, so we got the switch hooked up here. Let's see what else we need to do. Okay, we're going to run this AC wire across like this. But before we do that, let's go ahead and wire up the rectifier tube. And we've got our socket here, and we're only using 4 of the pins. And so for me, it makes it a lot easier to keep up with which pin goes where and which wires we're actually going to be connecting, to just cut off the pins that we're not going to be using. And so let me get my little, I got my little magnifier here. These tube sockets have numbers printed on them. So we're only using pins 2, 4, 6, and 8. So we can bend over pins 1, 3, 5, and 7. And then just snip them off once we bend them over, because we're not going to be using them. Just like that. So then the tube socket's going to sit in here like this. And then I do know we want to put this index slot towards the power socket, towards the back of the amp. Pins 2 and 8 are the heaters. Pin 8 is what we pull the DC off of. And then the 2 red wires are the high voltage AC go to pins 4 and 6. So let's go ahead and screw down this tube socket, and we can start hooking up the wires from the power transformer to the rectifier tube. Okay, so I got the rectifier tube socket screwed down to the chassis, and I'm using the little decorative trim rings on the top that these screw into. And before you tighten these up, flip the amp over, make sure that that ring is centered on the tube socket. There should be a little slop in the holes where you can move it around a little bit, and if it won't center up on it, you might have to get a little round file or your Dremel tool and slap the holes slightly to get the ring to line up perfectly with the tube socket. You want to get it as close as you can. Unfortunately, I already soldered these two wires up, and I thought the video was recording and it wasn't. So anyway, I don't think I got too far ahead. It was just these two wires here, and I can show you where they go. So these two yellow wires come out of this grommet, go under this red with yellow stripe center tap wire that's connected to our star ground point. And again, green with yellow stripe goes to this ground point too. Make sure that you put these in the right place. These green wires are not polarized. They can go to either one of these. But this green with yellow stripe has to go onto this ground. And same with this red with the yellow stripe has to go to this same terminal here. So then I pull these yellow wires. You want to loop these around under this and around these wires to get it as far away from the capacitor that's going to be sitting right here in a little bit. So we're trying to bring these wires around here and then solder it into the lower hole on this terminal, which is pin number 2. Solder into the lower hole on this terminal, which is terminal number 8. And then I go ahead and just cut off this upper hole because I'm not going to be using it, just to make it neater. And we're going to be using this upper hole on this terminal to go over here to the choke. And then also this big cap that's going to be sitting right here, one of the terminals to it goes into this hole. Okay, so now we're going to hook up these two red wires to pit terminals 4 and 6. So we just want to strip these back, and you want to strip back enough where you can, about like that, so you can put it through the hole and then bend it over. Try to make sure you get all of the little strands and you don't have any stray ones floating around. And then we're going to come in here and solder these two wires. Again, this is pin 4 and pin 6 that these red wires go to. Tube sockets are numbered. You probably have to get a magnifying glass to read it, but the numbers are there. So let me go over the connections we've done one more time, just so everybody's clear, and try to do it from several different angles here. So the red with the yellow stripe and the green with the yellow stripe go to this terminal right here. And remember, all three of these are connected together and they're grounded to the chassis. So this is our star ground point. You want to make sure that you leave enough room here right at the top. See, that's open, so we can put our capacitor lead through there. Then this pair of yellow wires runs around. These are the 5-volt heaters for the rectifier, and they come over here and are connected to pins 2 and 8. You can see the keyway right there. Let me see if I can get it where it's easier to see. There you go. Keyway's right there facing back. And then we hook up the red wires to pins 4 and 6. And then over here, we got these two green wires going into the bottom holes of that tag strip right there. And then you can see how I've got the yellow wire up against the chassis. And this red wire's kind of like up in the air a little bit. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I think keeping those wires away from each other doesn't hurt anything. So anyway, in the next video, we're going to hook up the power switch. We'll hook up these primary transformer wires all up to the IEC socket, get the power connected to it, and then we'll start installing the filter capacitors for the power supply and hook the choke up, and then we're going to be putting a little power resistor right here. So we'll do all that in the next video, and then we'll have the power supply done. Anyway, this is a good place to wrap up this video. So anyway, if you're enjoying this series, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon folks. If you're not a member and like you're building this and using this to help you build one, please consider joining my Patreon channel. It really helps a lot. Thanks to you folks that make donations at my website. And until next time, have a nice day.